Now son Gi Hun, the bumbling protagonist of Netflix's Squid Games, has the knack for surviving deadly games, but not thanks to any intelligence on his part. In fact, Gi Hun's journey through Season 1 and Season 2 is a case study in unintelligent decisions, emotional knee-jerks, and outright idiotic plans that somehow, often through sheer luck or others' mercy, did not get him unalived. From his ill-conceived choices in Season 1 to the hypocritical crusade he mounts in Season 2, we'll dive into how this character continually proves that making a lot of money doesn't buy you any common sense. So strap in for a critical tour of Gi Hun's dumbest decisions. In Season 1, Gi Hun starts off less like a mastermind and more like a clueless gambler coasting on pure luck. We meet him as a divorced, debt-ridden chauffeur who steals his mother's money to bet on horse races and miraculously wins, only to lose the money to a pickpocket minutes later.
Hey, kid, you okay?
In an idiotic introduction that perfectly sets up the tone, Gi Hun's priorities are upside down. He's got a young daughter to take care of and a mother in poor health, yet he's busy blowing cash at the track. As if that doesn't get any worse, he even cancelled his mother's health insurance to free up more money for gambling, a short-sighted move that leaves her unable to afford proper treatment for her diabetes. Now this decision comes back to hurt him in the cruelest way, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Once inside the games, Gi Hun continues to operate less on logic and more on emotion and dumb luck. In Season 1 Episode 1, Red Light Green Light, he's nearly eliminated in the first round. As gunfire erupts and panic spreads, Gi Hun freezes in terror at the worst possible time and starts to topple over. He's literally about to fall to his death when another player, Ali, number 199, grabs Gi Hun by the collar and holds him up, saving his life by a split second. It's a dramatic start that highlights that Gi Hun's survival had nothing to do with cleverness, and he survived in spite of his foolishness. Rather than carefully planning his moves, he lucked out by being saved by a stranger's quick reflexes. So, from the get-go, Gi Hun is surviving on others' charity and chance, not on his own wit. Gi Hun's approach to the game is a far cry from strategic. In Episode 3, The Man with the Umbrella, each player must choose a shape for the honeycomb candy challenge, and Gi Hun, clueless as ever, picks the most difficult shape, an umbrella, without a second thought. Gi Hun had no plan, he just liked how the umbrella looked.
The second game is sugar honeycomb is the shape you must remove.
So, when the game begins and he realizes that he has to carve out that tricky shape without cracking it, Gi Hun ends up sweating and licking the honeycomb like a madman to dissolve it, barely managing to succeed as the clock ticks down. Now, to give credit where credit is due, licking the candy was actually a clever hack, one of Gi Hun's rare sparks of ingenuity, and other players begin to copy his technique. But let's not forget, he only needed that desperate trick because he made an idiotic choice to begin with. Time and time again, Gi Hun's sentimental, impulsive nature leads him into peril. Nowhere is this more apparent than in Season 1 Episode 6, the infamous marbles game. When instructed to pair up, Gi Hun's survival instincts utterly fail him. He chooses the feeble old man, Il-nam, player 1 as his partner, and he does this out of pity and a misguided sense of loyalty. It's a sweet gesture, but a stupid one.
Come on, it's your turn.
Huh? Oh.
At this point, he assumes that teams will work together, but surprise, the game is actually a one-on-one elimination, and by picking the weakest person, Gi Hun essentially dooms himself to either outsmart a friend or be unalived. Then, during their marbles match, Gi Hun starts emotionally unraveling. He's on the verge of losing because he can't bear to trick Il-nam, and only when he's faced with imminent death does Gi Hun finally resort to deceiving the old man, exploiting player 1's apparent dementia to win the last marble. He survives, but it's a very hollow victory. Gi Hun is left sobbing in guilt while Il-nam is led away. And this is a prime example of Gi Hun's pattern, initially foolish and overly trusting, then forced into a desperate, morally dubious act to save his life. Right? A smarter player like Sung-woo, who cynically betrayed Ali in this same episode, would never have been in that position in the first place, because Sung-woo was there to win no matter what.
I have 20 marbles.
Even when Gi Hun reaches the final game, he nearly fumbles away everything through an emotional outburst. In episode 9, called One Lucky Day, it comes down to Gi Hun versus Sung-woo in the titular Squid Game. In the last game, Gi Hun actually gains the upper hand. He has victory in reach. And what does this genius do? He decides to stop and invoke the termination clause to end the game with no winner, rather than just finishing off Sang-woo, right? After 454 people have been unalived and literally bled for that prize money, Gi Hun's big plan is to call it quits so he and his opponent can just go home empty-handed. It's an astoundingly idiotic moment camouflaged as mercy. And in my opinion, it would have rendered all of those deaths meaningless. Now Sung-woo, who, for all of his flaws, at least plays to win, takes matters into his own hands by stabbing himself, thereby ensuring Gi Hun becomes the winner. In short, Gi Hun almost blew the entire game at the finish line because he felt bad. Right? His inability to stick to any logical plan, even when it's about to succeed, shows how governed he is by his emotions. And the thing is, he wins in spite of himself, not because of any tactical brilliance.
The players are able to end the game when the majority agrees.
Amazingly, Gi Hun does walk away with the 45.6 billion prize money, and you'd think winning a fortune to save his family was the goal all along. After all, Gi Hun was playing for his family, more specifically his daughter, and to take care of his mother. But once he has the money, Gi Hun proves once more that he's his worst enemy. Traumatized or not, he makes zero effort to use his newfound wealth to better anyone's life. Barely. Instead, he spends a whole year in stupor, living like a homeless person despite tens of billions of won sitting in the bank. Then, his mother dies in that time, and tragically, the cost of her medical care could have been easily covered, and Gi Hun doesn't even touch the fortune to give her a proper treatment or comfortable last days. Yes, he's in PTSD shock after the games, but at this point he's too dumb beyond belief. One might call it a noble guilt that he considers the money blood money, but from the outside it looks like pure waste. He won for his family, then promptly neglected them. What? Even the banker handling his account is baffled that Gi Hun won't invest or spend a single one of the prize. Right? Gi Hun basically becomes a homeless millionaire by choice, which is as idiotic as it sounds. Also, his parenting decisions, or lack thereof, are even more infuriating. Recall that Gi Hun's entire motivation to enter the game was to be able to support his daughter, yet after winning, he doesn't call his daughter at all, he doesn't fly to see her, he doesn't send any help, nothing. In fact, by the end of season 1, a full year has passed, and he's so estranged that his daughter's phone number isn't even in service for him, and she hasn't heard from him in ages. The man literally has the means to solve all of his personal problems, and he just doesn't. Finally, when Gi Hun finally shakes off his catatonia, it's only to make yet another nonsensical choice. In the season 1 finale, he's en route to the airport to reunite with his daughter at last. A year late, boarding pass in hand, but what does Gi Hun do? He turns around at the gate. At the very last moment, he calls the secret game organizers and essentially tells them, "I'm coming for you," rejecting his flight to the US. And that's the thing, he chooses revenge over his own child. Now let's put this in perspective. Gi Hun swore up and down he was playing the game for his little girl, and he endured all of that horror, wins the money for her, then voluntarily abandons her to chase a shadowy criminal organization, one that nearly unalived him already. It's an absolutely head-smacking decision. Any sensible person would either choose their wealth to alert the authorities, or at least go and be a father. I mean, that's what his whole arc was about. But what does Gi Hun do? He does the opposite. With one dramatic decision, he ensures that his daughter will grow up thinking her dad is unreliable, an absent loser, which, frankly, at this point he is. Now this moment brings us into season 2, where Gi Hun doubles down on being an idiot. If Gi Hun looked like an idiot in season 1, season 2 blows it up to epic proportions. Now, Gi Hun isn't just making poor choices for himself, he's dragging others into his ill-conceived plans. Season 2 picks up with Gi Hun a few years after his victory, and he has reinvented himself as a man on a mission. At this point, he's determined to take down the Squid Game organizers once and for all, and it's an admirable goal. But Gi Hun ends up being Gi Hun, and he tries to execute this plan in the most idiotic way possible. Right? This is after all the same guy who could barely tie his shoes without help in season 1. Now he thinks he can single-handedly outwit a sophisticated secret society of murder games. And as expected, the result is one ruined plan after another. Gi Hun's plan initially involves teaming up with others, a smart move in theory, but even he manages to bungle that. In the early episodes of season 2, we see Gi Hun form a small ragtag alliance. They help Gi Hun stockpile guns and even plant a tracking device on him. And yes, Gi Hun goes so far as to have a tracking device embedded in his own body, inside his teeth no less, so that his allies can trace him once he infiltrates the Squid Game. And to give credit where credit is due, that's quite resourceful for Gi Hun, and it looks like something out of a spy movie. But the big problem is he's Gi Hun. The game organizers anticipate interference, and soon enough, Gi Hun's cover is blown and his tracking ploy fails. In a confrontation at a neon-drenched nightclub, in season 2 episode 2, Gi Hun tries to corner the frontman in a limo and even pulls a weapon on him, but it backfires spectacularly. Outside, Gi Hun's backup team of ex-military mercenaries gets ambushed by the game snipers. So, all of Gi Hun's meticulous preparation evaporates in an instant. So much for the big rescue operation. It ends before it ever begins, and that's thanks to Gi Hun drastically underestimating his enemy. So by the time the smoke clears at the club, Gi Hun is forced to surrender and beg the frontman to let him back into the games as a contestant, a desperate plan B.
Welcome back to the game.
Right, his great infiltration plan ends up with him right back where he began in season 1, a player in the very death games he wanted to destroy. And if that's not a sign of a failed strategy, nothing is. So we're back in the games for season 2, and at this point Gi Hun proves he hasn't learned much at all. Sure, he's more grim and focused this time, no more goofy smiles, no naive trust in everyone, but he finds new ways to be an idiot. Knowing how the first Squid Game went, Gi Hun tries to predict and manipulate the new one. For instance, in episode 3, the first game is red light, green light again, which likely gives Gi Hun a burst of confidence. So at this point he's thinking, this is going to be a piece of cake. But the game organizers quickly outsmart him by changing up subsequent games and rules, nullifying any edge he thought he had. A new rule is then introduced. The contestants can vote to end the game after each round, and not just at the start. So Gi Hun is thinking, okay, once the other players see that this game is about life and death, they're all going to end the game. But that doesn't happen, because most of the players are desperate for life-changing money. So, Gi Hun's inability to anticipate people's motivations foreshadows the disaster to come. Now, as if this doesn't look Gi Hun look even worse, he becomes an even bigger idiot in season 2 episode 7, Friend or Foe, which can only be described as the rebellion fiasco. Fed up with how things are going, Gi Hun convinces a small group of like-minded contestants to join him in an armed revolt against the game staff. On paper, it does sound heroic. Overthrow the masked guards, capture the frontman, and end the nightmare. But in practice, it's stupid. Gi Hun's rebel alliance comprises maybe a dozen players with stolen guns, and they're supposed to go up against a fortress of guards, soldiers, and unknown traps. Right? The frontman and his people outnumber and outgun the players by far, and they know the arena's layout inside out. It's like a handful of amateurs with pistols charging a military base. It's just not a good plan.
These orders, then you will be eliminated.
but Gi Hun barrels ahead, blinded by a mix of vengeance and savior complex. He truly believes this is the moment to change everything, which only shows how deep his delusion runs. So, the rebellion unfolds in a predictably tragic fashion. Gi Hun's group manages a brief surprise attack. They ambush a few guards during a chaotic night brawl between contestants. They snatch some MP5 rifles and make a break for the control center. Then Gi Hun, in a move that encapsulates his twisted logic, allows a riot to erupt among the players as a cover for his plan. So, when a violent free-for-all breaks out between those who wanted to quit and those who wanted to continue, Gi Hun and his co-conspirators hide and let the carnage happen as a distraction. In other words, our hero sits by while players he promised to help are butchered by others. All of this so he can get the drop on the gods. So much for trying to save everybody.
You can't let them get to the management area.
Now by the time the dust settles, dozens of bodies are on the floor, but Gi Hun's rebels do manage to seize some weapons and even capture a guard leader. It's a fleeting glimmer of success in an otherwise doomed scenario. Now once the element of surprise fades, Gi Hun's lack of a real plan becomes evident. He leads his band through a maze-like complex, intent on storming the frontman's command post. However, almost immediately, they face heavily armed guards who pin them down in a stairwell sniper crossfire. Now at this point, the rebels are outmaneuvered and quickly start dropping like flies. One by one, the players Gi Hun convinced to fight are shot and unalived. Right? There's no contingency, no backup coming to rescue them, and Gi Hun and the rebels are being outmaneuvered by superior tactics. I mean, what else did he think was going to happen? Nearly all of Gi Hun's comrades die, and in the end he's forced to surrender. It's a bloodbath that accomplishes nothing except thinning the player population, and this is ironically doing the frontman's work for him.
Young-il! What's going on? You still there?
At this point, Gi Hun's dream of a glorious uprising goes up in smoke, and he's left worse off than before, except now his friends have been unalived. Now the cruelest twist of the rebellion fiasco is the betrayal lurking at its core. Unbeknownst to Gi Hun, one of his own allies was actually the frontman in disguise all along. Right? And the thing is, Gi Hun, in his trademark style, never suspected a thing. He practically welcomed player 1 into his confidence, repeating the same mistake he made in season 1 with the old man who was also player number 1. Now by the time the revolt kicked off, player number 1, Young-il, conveniently split from the group, then turned and gunned down several rebels from behind, sabotaging the coup at its critical moments.
Young-il! Young-il! Say something!
Now this twist shows us just how out of his depth Gi Hun really was. He not only failed to anticipate the obvious tactical problems in his plan, he didn't even notice the wolf in disguise in his henhouse. In the aftermath, Gi Hun stands amid the carnage of his own making. His closest friend Jong Bae lies dead at his feet, shot as collateral damage in the failed coup, along with many other innocents. Gi Hun himself is beaten, captured, and utterly defeated. As the frontman later notes with a satisfied smirk, Gi Hun's attempt to be a hero only proved one thing. Gi Hun is willing to abandon his principles and sacrifice others to win, just like the frontman or any villain would. In trying to outsmart the game, Gi Hun became what he hated the most, and still lost spectacularly. Now looking at both seasons, a clear pattern emerges. Gi Hun is constantly ruled by emotion and ego over logic. In season 1, his heart is often in the right place, but that leads him to very dumb choices, whether it's trusting the wrong people or refusing to do what needs to be done to save himself and others. In season 2, that same emotional streak is twisted into a savior complex. Gi Hun becomes so obsessed with stopping the games that he completely loses sight of the human realities around him.
그때를 노려야 합니다.
He doesn't even consider that the other players might want to be there, because this might be the only time in their lives that they get a chance to win that amount of money, right? He moralizes about saving everyone, yet ends up getting a lot of them unalived. The hypocrisy is stark. Gi Hun condemns the game organizers for treating people like expendable pawns, but in season 2, he effectively does the same thing, treating his fellow players as tools for his rebellion. He might as well become the frontman at this point, and maybe that's where this is going. So, across Squid Game Season 1 and 2, Gi Hun moves from one blunder to the next, from nearly losing a deadly children's game because he could not stop trusting an old man, to nearly getting a bunch of people massacred because he thought he was some sort of savior. In Season 1, he won a fortune for his daughter, only to abandon her. So in the end, Gi Hun might have a good heart buried under all that stupidness, but the evidence suggests that he's his own worst enemy. Now perhaps the cruel joke of Squid Game is that the ultimate survivor is not the cleverest or strongest, it's the lucky fool, and Gi Hun, lovable idiot that he is, fits that bill perfectly.